there? Okay, as soon as you set yourself, we'll start. Okay, gotcha, I'll tell the guys. Okay. Hey, Peter. Whoops, Peter's gone. I want to tell you this. Okay. Mike's just pick him up. Oh, yeah, so I'd rather not.
So you got your mic and everything?
Yeah, it's set.
All right, cool. So yeah, and these are
It's not physically on.
right. You don't have to worry about these.
Yes. Okay.
It's not physically on. Okay.
Beautiful. This is my mark. Bill, how are you? Good to see you. Good.
One second.
We're supposed to.
We're ready. We're broadcasting.
Okay. Okay. Well, so which microphone do you want me to? Do you want me to use the handheld?
That's up to you. If you're going to move around, great. But that's going to be for a vocalist. That's all.
Okay.
The levels are all set.
So right now it's turned off.
I believe Steve's
If
waiting.
what we have here is good, then we'll just do that.
That's the plan.
Good.
And I think what happens is you put it up, which is great, and then other people come up and then they don't know what to do.
Okay.
So,
All right.
thanks a lot.
If it's picture in the background.
Good morning. Thanks for coming.
What do you think? What do you think of the
Yeah.
picture?
So. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Town of Brighton's annual celebration of Black History Month. I'm Bill Maley, Brighton Town Supervisor. I'm very pleased to see all of you here today. Each year, we celebrate Black History Month here in the Town of Brighton. We do it to reinforce the message that Black history is American history. Brighton is and always will be a community that views our diversity as a strength and therefore celebrates our diversity in every way. We know that people choose to live in Brighton because of our diversity, and we in local government, the level of government that is closest to the people, have an obligation today and every day to continue to make our diversity part of our identity as a community. We do so today by honoring Black History Month. But we must do so every day by standing strong against those who would dismiss the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in this community and in our nation. I ask you all to please rise if you are physically able. If not, please rise in spirit and join me in a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You can be seated. As we celebrate Black History Month here in Brighton, it's also important that we honor, celebrate, and acknowledge the heritage of the Haudenosaunee, the original keepers of this land. This is land here where we are today at Empire State University, at Town Hall, and throughout the town of Brighton. We're situated on the ancestral and traditional lands of the Onondaga tribe of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, whom we recognize and respect as the traditional custodians of this land throughout the generations. We pay our respects to Onondaga elders, both past and present. The history, the culture, and the traditions of the Onondaga are truly worthy of our understanding and study, and we praise those who keep those traditions alive. We recognize that the study and the understanding of the Onondaga history, culture, and traditions is of ongoing, continuing importance if we are to truly understand the history, the culture, and the traditions of this community and our nation. We support efforts to ensure that we and future generations continue to respect and recognize the Onondaga in a way that is honest and truthful, so that in the words of Sacagawea, the great Haudenosaunee chief and orator, also known as Red Jacket, we may continue to always work together to brighten the chain of friendship. In these times, when the honorable sometimes becomes controversial in the hands of people with an agenda to divide instead of to unite, let me ask you all to stand again to honor the Black National Anthem, lift every voice and sing. And I'm very pleased to welcome our vocalist today, Pamela Mensah, to sing.
Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not a weary feet come to the place for which our Father sighed. We have come over a place where the seas have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who has brought us thus far on the way, thou who has by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Battle beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
Thank you so much, Pamela. I had the pleasure of listening to Pamela, the sound check before, and I knew we were going to be in for a treat today. Thank you so very, very much. That was really extraordinary. And again, in a time when as beautiful a song as that seems to have become controversial in some circles, it is an important part of any ceremony of this kind. So thank you so much for being with us. We do have a number of elected officials that are here today that I want to introduce. I'm going to start with Rose Bonnick because Rose is wearing two hats today. Rose is a member of the Monroe County Legislature, and she is also here on behalf of Senator Jeremy Cooney, who I suspect is in Albany today.
On his way back.
On his way back, okay. Well, hopefully the roads are good between here and there. We have Brighton Town Justice, Vic Vilkew is with us. Thank you, Judge. We appreciate you being here and the work you've done already in barely over a year. You've made a difference in the court, and it is noticed. Thank you. We also have from the Brighton Town Board, Councilmember Robin Wilt, whom you will hear from later, Councilmember Chris Warner, and Councilmember Christine Corrado. We also have longtime Brighton School Board member and chair of Brighton's IDEA Board, our Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Advisory Board, the only one of its kind in any town in upstate New York that I'm aware of, Mark Kukanovich. Thank you, Mark. We're doing something a little different this year. You see the setup here. This year's theme of Black History Month, African Americans and Labor. And we're going to have a fireside chat in just a moment on that theme. I think it's going to be really something to carry with you today, because we know that the history of Black Americans and labor is one that dates back to forcible extraction from Africa in the 17th century. And we may have come a long ways, but we got a long ways to go, and we're going to talk about that. We will have Brighton's Chief Diversity Officer, Miriam Moore. Miriam came to the town of Brighton as part of the implementation. Actually, I think before we even formally implemented the plan, we knew we weren't going to make it, adopted the plan. We knew we weren't going to really be able to effectuate the recommendations of the committee without hiring a chief diversity officer. Again, that's not something, if you look around the town halls in Monroe County or upstate New York, that you're going to see. But we are a community that understands the importance of that work. With Miriam in our fireside chat today is our special guest, Dr. Tamika Wagstaff. Dr. Wagstaff is the Vice President for Justice, Equity, Belonging, and Identity at the College of Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. I hope I got that right. Good. Before she was at Holy Cross, Dr. Wagstaff served for over 13 years at RIT, most recently as Assistant Vice President for Student Access and Success, which seems pretty central to what a university should be about. Dr. Wagstaff earned bachelor's and master's degrees from Buffalo State University. Her doctorate in higher education administration is from the University of Rochester. So I am very pleased to introduce our fireside chat today, Miriam Moore and Dr. Tamika Wagstaff.
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I would really like for you all to give another round of applause for Dr. Tamika Wagstaff, who has been an esteemed colleague in this work for many years. Welcome. So, Dr. Wagstaff, we're having a conversation, and we have friends in the room.
Yes.
I think it's most suitable to start with a question around the first connection between Africans and the diaspora of the Americas and labor, and that is with chattel slavery. Mm-hmm. While African Americans experienced sustained economic disadvantages, this country benefited greatly from this unbelievably inhumane form of labor and the legal human ownership of humans. What is the true economic legacy of chattel slavery?
You come out the gate with a great question. And it's funny because when I thought about the national theme for Black History Month, African Americans in Labor, I was like, wow, really? Okay, this is like a really heavy topic, and I think it really resonates still today. And the main point for me is always all roads lead back to economics. And when you think about leaving a legacy for your family, when you think about what it means to be in control of money and making decisions and wealth and owning people, places, things, I think that's where the legacy has been when you think about slavery. I think about even in my own family, when you think about leaving a legacy, what does that look like as opposed to I work every day on a Catholic Jesuit campus of a small liberal arts college that has names on buildings of people who own slaves, whose great-great-great-grandchildren are attending the college and living in the dorms with their names on it, right? That is economics. That's leaving a legacy. That is what slavery afforded some people to be able to do, to have a legacy of wealth, right? Whether it was through owning people, whether it was through owning the land, whether it was passing that down through generations, it was something that African Americans weren't able to achieve during that time. It was something that we were the economics. We were the things that people wanted to own, and we were the reason why people had wealth. We were the reason why people had their crops taken care of. We were the reason why people had their children taken care of. And I like to remember my grandmother used to say, always remember this country was built on the backs of African Americans. And that is, to me, what really came out of slavery. We built a country that still to this day doesn't look at us as people who have left a legacy here. And so I think that to me is what came out of chattel slavery, is a country that we built that we don't all own or have a legacy in the same way when you look at economics.
Very good. Dr. Wagstaff, African Americans and their work within benevolent societies perhaps presented some of the earliest forms of charity work and mutual aid. These benevolent societies were typically positioned within small churches and were formed by former enslaved persons. Assigning orphans, ensuring that there were proper burials, and establishing forms of financial assistance were some of the acts of such. Scholarship suggests that African Americans have a unique angle as it relates to volunteerism and leading in the modern nonprofit sector. Talk to us about the historical connection and today's connection of African Americans and community.
Well, I think if you think historically, we had to create our own communities. And there were things that we didn't have access to or that other people weren't going to create for us. And so we created them for ourselves, whether that is nonprofit organizations, whether that are organizations that came out of small churches, whether that's sororities and fraternities, whether that's the Masons, whether that's the NAACP or other organizations that were created. We historically create our own communities. We create ways to support each other. We create ways to find the resources we need to sustain and survive. We historically, and still to this day, create opportunities where we can go into our communities and ensure that our children have free lunches and free breakfast, that they have a solid education or access to a solid education. Or access to many other things, experiences. I was just saying this morning that my son and his father left for Guatemala on a service trip with Brighton. They're in middle school. That opportunity is not everywhere, right? So having opportunities to situate your family where they have access to things that they may not normally have access to is part of what I believe we do as African Americans in creating the community. and creating the resources that we need. And sometimes that's out of necessity, and sometimes that's out of wanting to create resources that we don't have to go to other people for, because so many times those resources aren't created for us, they aren't afforded to us. And when they are, there's so much red tape to access such resources. And so I think historically it's come out of necessity. It's come out of us wanting to have the opportunity to have something that is ours, to provide support and hope to our own community, where we're not relying on the white man to come in and do it for us and come in and be the white savior for our communities.
Dr. Wagstaff, what about the connection between African Americans and acts that are noble, right? Sort of this framing of nonprofit organizations. Do we tend to have, as African Americans, blacks, you'll hear the two used interchangeably, have a unique lens as it relates to
Philanthropy?
Yes.
Yes. I would say yes. And I think that's because it's been instilled in us from hundreds of years ago to reach behind, to bring people forward, to give back, to afford others opportunities that maybe we weren't able to have, to want to be a part of organizations and opportunities to give back to the larger community, to be able to not necessarily be the voice for, but to be someone who is leading the way for others, who's removing barriers and trying to have conversations and have a seat at the table, which many nonprofit organizations afford us the opportunity to have a seat at the table where decisions are being made, where we can make a broader impact on our communities and monies that are coming in and going out.
Very good. Okay, between World War I and World War II, it is estimated that about 2 million African Americans left the South for other parts of the country, the Great Migration, New York, Chicago, Detroit, and a host of other northern cities. And these northern cities undoubtedly experienced a shift in racial demographics. The recruitment of white men into the military created labor shortages, where both African American men and women widely entered the workforce in industrial roles. While the migration provided access to factory jobs previously unavailable to African Americans, they were often confined to the most physically demanding and low-paying positions. During a time when the ideologies of diversity, equity, and inclusion are under extreme scrutiny, and the institution of diversity, equity, and inclusion are being dismantled in real time, please share your thoughts on true labor equity.
Okay. So I think in the dismantling of DEI is so in real time for me, right? Just the virtue of the work that I do in my role. And I think, as you heard in my title, some of that work was already done ahead of time. So kind of forecasting things that may happen, things that might change, and how to kind of safeguard the work for some people. And I think I was having this conversation with you earlier where people are always like, well, you work in Massachusetts, you know, and you are home-based here in Rochester. And I said to Miriam, I said, right, so as a black woman with 3 college degrees, over 25 years of experience, in order for me to get a job that's willing to pay me what I'm worth, in my terms of what I'm worth, I have to work in Massachusetts, right? Because that's where that job was. That's who was willing to pay me for the work, for my ideas, for the things that I bring to the table. And that is reality. And so I think that labor equity, when you think about black women, when you think about African Americans in general, sometimes it doesn't matter how much education you have, how much experience you have, whether it was then or whether it's now, you're looked at as less than. You're looked at as not having the experience. You're looked at as, well, you can come in and do this role That's not the role that I want. I want that role. I want that role because I know that I'm more qualified than any of the white men that you've already interviewed for that role. I know I have more education than they have. I know I have more lived experience than they have to do this job and to do the work. I think when I listened to watching the football, this came up, Super Bowl, this came up for me. Just listening to the way the commentators talk about black men playing football, you know, that stud, that the words that we're still looked at as a thing that provides entertainment or a thing that makes people money, more so than someone who has a diversity of thought to bring to the table. And so I think that that is something that you saw historically. So having the most, you know, demanding jobs and roles for someone's body because you're looked at as someone who historically has had to do work where you can shoulder a lot of things, where you had to be strong, where you had to be this. And so that has transferred over into the way we look at, in particular, our black men, especially our black men in sports. A lot of times it's almost still like they're on that auction block and people are looking at them for their physicality. They're looking at them for how hard they can run them into the ground. They're looking at them for how hard of a hit they can take or how hard of a hit that they can make, not because they have something else of value to offer. And so for me, I always find that when I'm hiring people, when I'm on a hiring committee, those are the conversations that I want to have. Like, well, why aren't you interested in this person? I even have had people say, well, you probably shouldn't put Tamika on your resume. If you just put Dr. Wagstaff, it is kind of ambiguous. They won't know if you're black, if you're white. A lot of people think the last name is German, so they're like, are you? No, I'm not. I'm black. First name is Tamika, spelled very differently than most people would spell it. But it's reality, and it's true because I serve on so many search committees. I train all of our search committees on campus, and so it is a reality of what happens when people see a name, or some people will put their picture on a resume. And I always tell people that's not the best idea because you want your work, your accolades to speak for themselves, not for people to get distracted by what you look like.
I'm going to skip the next question just because this, your response will allow us to sort of move flawlessly into. So I have a notion that I hold close to the vest, and that is what is good for one must be good for all. Access to desirable professional roles based solely on merit is rarely a thing. What do you have to say to those who say merit-based recruitment, hiring, and professional ascension is the great equalizer?
I think I would go back to my point about access, right? So when I spent 13 and a half years at RIT, all of my work was around access and success for students, in particular our most marginalized students, in whichever way you can think of marginalized. I spent a lot of time writing grants to bring in money to provide services, to provide access tools so people could be successful. If we don't all have access to the same things, the same education, the same school systems. I don't know how many of you have visited different school districts in Rochester. They're very different, right? So your children in one district have access to certain things that in another district they would never fathom could be an opportunity for them. So I think you can't have merit-based hiring and say that what's good for one is good for the other if we don't all have access to the same things to begin with in the first place. Because my merit may not show up the same as yours because I didn't have access to take AP classes. Right. I didn't have access to take, to start college early and do a 2+2 program. Maybe I didn't have access to do internships. I may not have access to those things. So even, for example, College of the Holy Cross, it costs probably tomorrow $90,000 a year to attend that college, right? And so the students who come there come from all over the place. And they're very smart because it takes a lot to get into the college. But there are still students who come there and they don't succeed because even though academically they can get into the college, they still didn't have access to some of the same things that their peers who are full-pay students. So you have families that are paying $90,000 a year out of their pocket for their children to attend that school, and students who are on full need scholarships. They didn't have access to the same things.
Sure.
So the way that they show up, the way that they're going to succeed or not, is going to be very different. The access that they have to internship opportunities, very different. Their parents' circles don't even live in the same hemisphere, right? It's totally different. And so you can't, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because we all don't have the same access to the same things. We all don't have the same education. We all don't live in Brighton. We all don't live in communities where people look out for each other or help each other or support each other or who give you the information about the opportunities that you may not know about. It just isn't our reality as a community, as a country, as a world most of the time. And that's no matter what you look like. And that's black, white, Spanish, wherever you come from, whatever ethnic background you might be, we're all starting at a different point.
For sure.
Some of us are further ahead than others when we start.
All right. African Americans have made significant contributions to a myriad of fields: the arts, education, finance, law, and science and technology. Let's take a minute to celebrate some of the contributors that are far too often omitted from broad literature. Frederick McKinley, who invented the mobile refrigeration. Garrett Morgan, who invented the gas mask, an early prototype of the traffic light. Percy Julian, who discovered how to make medicines from plants, including cortisone, steroids, birth control pills. Charles Drew introduced better ways to store blood, including mobile blood donation stations. Alice Augusta Baugh offered a viable treatment for Hansen's disease. How does America keep the legacies of these outstanding contributors to STEM centered? Does America see these brilliant minds and their contributions as true American history?
I think it would depend on who you ask. I think it would depend on what classrooms you're in. I think the reality is the onus many times is on us as parents to ensure that our children learn the information, right? I think the onus is on us as communities to ensure that that information is highlighted and that people do know. I think on the large stage of America, as we see every day, that information probably is going to start going away and dwindling and not be allowed to be taught or seen or celebrated. I think those are real possibilities that we have to grapple with. And so I think we as a community have to take the power back and the onus and the ownership back of ensuring that that information is shared and it's celebrated and it's highlighted. I don't think any longer we can depend on the country as a whole to do that. And I think in so many ways, you know, I asked my son's social studies teacher, you know, what were they learning for Black History Month? And it's always usually the same things, right? Everybody's gonna learn about Martin Luther King Jr. Everybody's gonna learn about the same 5 people. And the response was kind of like, well, it's better than it was, or like some of the other classes don't learn this. And it's like, right, but that's just at the bare minimum. And so I think it's also the responsibility of educators to take a larger step and to take the responsibility of ensuring that that information is being shared, and not what we pick and choose to share, right? But the actual information of the way that African Americans have impacted the way that this country is even able to exist, right? The sheer things that we have access to and are able to enjoy the fruits of, many of those are just a few. I mean, there are so many things that you wouldn't even think about on a daily basis that you rely on to live and function that were created by African Americans. And so I think if people spent more time paying attention to that, there may be more of a celebration and appreciation. But the onus, I think, is on us to kind of create that impetus for people to do that, unfortunately.
Okay, all right. Last 2 questions, Dr. Wagstaff. Double consciousness, coined by W.E.B. Du Bois. speaks to the dual self-perception experienced by subordinated groups. Business scholars assert that double consciousness is what Blacks, African Americans, must contend with, especially as they seek to participate in the U.S. labor force. Unseen by the broader society, but nonetheless a very real thing. How has bearing the burden of double consciousness impacted Blacks in these spaces of labor?
This goes to the point, I think, of invisible labor that people don't talk about. The invisible labor that it is to be, and I'll just speak from my own experience, right? A Black woman in predominantly white male spaces, which is, and if you look at higher education across the board, most people at the senior leadership level are white males, and that's on many campuses outside of HBCUs or HSIs. And there's always this notion of how you show up to the table, right? It's the balance between being perceived as aggressive and being perceived as, you know, the person that wants to work with everyone. It's the angry Black woman versus the do I even say anything? It's the I have locks, I have piercings, I have tattoos. Do I need to cover those up? And also, being at a Catholic Jesuit, small liberal arts institution in New England brings up its own layers and levels of who are you when you show up every day. And so I think we don't talk about that. We don't talk about being one of the only. And so when there are students or there are faculty or when there are staff or other employees who look like you, they are connected to you, they congregate to you. So all of their woes and all of their issues, they're like, who do I bring them to? Well, of course, you're gonna first bring them to the person that you connect with, that you feel looks like you, right? So then you're carrying the labor of that. You're carrying the labor of everybody who might come in the room behind you because you don't wanna mess it up, right? I want to be the person in the room who people look at and say, you know what, that other Black girl, maybe we're gonna hire her. Right? So there's the labor of carrying that responsibility of not wanting to mess it up for someone else that comes behind you. Even for my son, like we have conversations all the time where I'm like, okay, you know, you can't do this, don't do this. Don't go in that store with your hood on, even though all your friends have their hoodies on, you are the only brown one. So that means take your hood off because you don't want somebody to think that you're doing this. Or, you know, your friends might be doing these things and it might be okay, but that doesn't mean it's okay for you. Our children bear the brunt of that too, right? They have this double consciousness that they have to bring when they're going to predominantly white school districts where it's always like, well, you have to be more careful than everyone else, right? You have to try harder than everyone else. You have to not get in any trouble because if you get in trouble, what happens for you might be different than what happens for everyone else. And so those are the pieces that I think we don't talk about. It's the things that you see out front, but it's those invisible things that you carry with you every day that sis holds you, like my shoulders are tired most days, right? I'm like, I have to show up as me, but I'm showing up as me for all the people who might come in the room behind me. I'm showing up as me and people are like, you know, you should show up as your true, authentic self. Well, I always argue that point because for me, my workplace may not be the place that deserves my true authentic self. They deserve Tamika, the professional that's going to come and do the work and do it to the best of my ability and always with excellence. But they might not deserve the Tamika that is at home with my family, right? My true authentic self may not be the one they want to show up in the room.
May not be.
Right? It might not be on any given day. That might not be the Tamika they want at the table. And so it's always finding that fine line between what does that actually mean to be an African American woman in the workplace, but also being the Tamika I am when I walk out the door, right? And that's the Tamika I am in the community when I'm trying to give back. That's the Tamika I am when I'm at my son's school, right, doing Black History Month programs or tabling or being a part of the PTSA and all the other 150 things you have to be a part of to make sure that your child is in all the spaces, getting all the information and having all the access. That's exhausting too in and of itself, right? So I think it's that labor too. It's the labor of being a mother, right? And what does that mean, especially in today's society, being a mother of a young Black boy and trying to raise him and protect him so that he gets to see the next day. Because so often, if you watch the news all the time, there are so many of our Black and brown boys who don't get to see the next day, right? So that's another burden of labor that comes along with it. And loving a black man, right? What is that? That's a whole other part of labor that people don't talk about either, because you never know when they walk out the door and leave the house what could happen. No matter how educated they are, no matter what job they have, no matter what kind of car they drive, no matter how much taxes you pay on your home, you just never know. And so I think that is what we grapple with as a community, as a race, day in and day out, whether it's for a job or whether it's sheerly to survive every day.
Dr. Wagstaff, I have to ask you this, and we are getting close to time here, but I'm so loving, hearing from you. This messaging that you speak of, this extra weight that many blacks would argue are a part of, an unseen part of their life, their days. In the realm of labor. Did this sort of messaging, was it instilled, was it extended to you very early on?
Oh, yeah. I was raised in a single family household, and my mother was an educator. So she constantly was reminding me, like, you need to work harder. You need to read more. You need to write more. You need to smile more. And I always laugh at that, because when I first started working at RIT, I would always wear my earbuds, because people think I'm very social and I want to chit chat. Most of the time I don't. And so I would wear my earbuds all the time, because I'm like, if I have earbuds in, clearly, like, nobody's going to try and chat with me because I'm doing something else. But it didn't stop people. Or it's like, well, I would constantly be told, you need to smile more. And I'm like, for what and for who? Like, what am I? Some days I don't have anything that I'm smiling about walking across this campus.
That's true.
But yes, you need to smile more. You have to be polite. You need to do this. You need to show up this way. You need to be early.
Yeah.
So absolutely. And then my grandfather, he was in the Navy. And so he always had that kind of, you have to be on time, do this, respect people. Like, he was very, rigid in that way. And I spent a lot of time with him. So a lot of that comes through in kind of my thinking and the way that I do things. But yes, it was instilled in me very early. And I don't know right, wrong, or indifferent, because sometimes I go back and forth with doing that with our son is, how much is too much? Where do you find the fine line? How do you find balance? But the reality is our world gets scarier every day. And so at a time that we're in right now, in this moment in time, I feel like you can't do that enough, right? Because you want to ensure the safety of the people you love to the extent possible to you.
Final question.
Okay.
Allyship. Many in this room have heard the term and have perhaps touched upon it, maybe at surface. But there are some unspoken rules to offering true allyship. I want you to round this segment out by talking about allyship in the professional realm. Does it mean that the acceptance of Blacks, African Americans, should only be when they are operating in a docile manner, when they are being subordinate? Is that really a strike against Blacks and African Americans being able to lend their authentic voice, drive strategy, all the things that should be extended to individuals in the professional realm?
It's funny because sometimes I have sat at our leadership team meetings and seen some of my colleagues have tantrums and just say things that I would never fathom of saying. And I walk out of the room and I think, if I had said that, right, like they probably would have escorted me out like 5 minutes after that. But I think that there also is balance. I think true allyship in a professional setting for me looks like when I've had a colleague or someone that I've looked to for mentoring. And I think it's important to have mentors that don't look like you too, right? Like you want to have
for
mentors
sure.
that have a vast variety of different backgrounds and settings. But for me, allyship looks like someone saying, that's not what she was saying, right? So if I'm in a room and I'm trying to say something and get a message across and it's being taken as aggressive or combative, I'm looking for the person in the room who is comfortable stepping outside of themselves and saying, that's not what's happening here. You're taking it that way.
Private.
Right.
Not in front.
Or in front.
Okay.
You know, I've been in situations where I've had a colleague that has called out someone else and said, you're being unprofessional right now. That's not what she is saying. That's not how she's coming at you. And now you're, turning it into something that is not. I think that we all have to have the courage to be able to do that in a point in time. And sometimes that takes maturity and professional growth. And the know-withal to know when is the right moment and when it's not. But, and I've been in that situation for colleagues who, white, brown, whatever the case may be, in order to be an ally, you have to be able to feel uncomfortable and step outside of yourself. So many times we have people who show up as performative allies who want to just be there for the photo ops. They want to, tell you how much they understand everything you're going through, but they've never even driven through your community before. But sometimes that's education too, right? I had one of my son's friends came over one time, and as we were driving to our house, he was like, "Is this the hood?" And I was like, "No." I say, "If I could drive you through there, if that's what you would like, but this is not. No, this is not that. There are quite more diversity here maybe than you're used to, but this is not the hood." So I think sometimes it's education, right? Because people don't know what they don't know. They don't understand.
I see.
But I think a true ally is willing to be uncomfortable. They're willing to learn. They're willing to ask permission for access, right? Because so many times people will just show up and infiltrate a space and think that means that they're being an ally because they want to be there. Not that anyone asked them, not that anyone invited them, not that anyone said, we need you in this space to stand with us or to be our ally, because sometimes those spaces are sacred and you're not invited, right? It just is what it is. But there are other times when maybe we'll call you in to that space and say, actually, this is a moment in time where we need you and we need your allyship and we need your voice, because coming from you, the message may be received differently. And if you want to be a true ally, now is your moment in time to step up and do that.
Dr. Wagstaff, you are all things amazing. I,
Thank you.
on behalf of the town of Brighton, want to thank you for lending your voice and your time, your talents
Thank you.
to us in this space. Resilience, agility are you, and I am sure that you would offer those terms as descriptive of Blacks, African Americans who are in the labor force. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wagstaff, Miriam. I echo the thanks and the gratitude. That was very, very powerful. And yeah, the onus is on us. We've talked a lot about labor, work today, and you can't escape that topic. It's fraught with the history of slavery, indentured servitude, Jim Crow laws, and structural inequities that have devalued the labor of Black Americans, not just in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, but today. But there's also a history of working men and women across the country and here in Rochester that they're rewriting that history. The Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, CBTU, was founded in 1972. And since that time, they've organized across the country as part of the labor movement, not only to improve economic development and employment opportunities for black workers, but to work within and outside established union and political structures to effect change to benefit black working people. And just like black history is American history, when the CBTU and others work to effect change to benefit black working people, they are effecting change to benefit all working people. Unfortunately, the leaders of CBTU were not able to be here today, but we presented a proclamation last night. We read it at last night's town board meeting. I'm going to read a portion of it today, and I will be presenting it to the local CBTU chapter. Whereas, since its establishment in 1976, Black History Month has been increasingly influential in educating our country about the significant contributions African Americans have made to the social, scientific, and cultural growth of the United States. Whereas Black History Month is a time of celebration and inspiration when we can applaud the progress America has made in acknowledging the depth and breadth of systemic racism and be moved to continue that progress, even in the face of new challenges at the federal level that reinforce the stain of structural racism on our nation. Whereas the 2025 theme for Black History Month is African Americans in Labor, which focuses on the various and profound ways that work and working of all kinds, both free and unfree, have impacted the African American experience. And whereas the Rochester chapter of the Coalition for Black Trade Unionists organizes black workers and strives to improve their economic, political, and social well-being by ensuring that their voices are heard and experiences shared within trade unions, while increasing job training and employment opportunities for African American youth, and uniting organizations dedicated to improving the lives of those most disadvantaged among us. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, William W. Maley, Brighton Town Supervisor, and the members of our Brighton Town Council do hereby recognize February 2025 as Black History Month in the town of Brighton, and further recognize the important work of the Rochester chapter of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. This proclamation was signed yesterday, February 12th, by myself and by the members of the Brighton Town Board. Next, I would like to introduce Brighton Town Council member Robin Wilt for her remarks on Black History Month.
Thank you, Bill. And again, I would like to thank Miriam and Dr. Wagstaff for that really, really inspiring conversation. Really raises a lot of the topics that I'm going to discuss here in my comments. So as we've heard, the 2025 Black History Month theme, African Americans and Labor, highlights the profound ways that labor intersects with the collective experiences of Black workers and the overall struggle for civil rights. From skilled to unskilled, from voluntary to unfree labor, African Americans have shaped and defined the labor movement while advocating for equity, justice, and dignity in the workplace and beyond. However, as most topics that surround the United States' relationship with the Black community, Black labor in America is rife with tensions and contradictions. At the heart of Black history in the United States is the nation's original sin of chattel slavery and forced labor. According to scholars like Nicole Hannah-Jones, from 1619 to 1865, the U.S. benefited from over 222 million hours of unpaid, dehumanizing forced labor by enslaved Black people. This labor, primarily supporting the production of tobacco, rice, sugar, and cotton, would be valued at over $97 trillion today. And it was all built on the backs of Blacks. The recurring theme at the intersection of Blacks and labor in America has been, very regrettably, the theft of Black wealth, thereby placing labor rights at the center of the struggle for Black human rights overall. Despite slavery still being institutionalized, as early as 1850, the American League of Colored Laborers was being organized in New York City. And in 1858, the Association of Black Caulkers was founded in Baltimore to protect members from racist mob violence. During Reconstruction, there were Black labor unions for longshoremen, butchers, bricklayers, caulkers, and draymen, among other occupations. Following the collapse of Reconstruction, Black farmers, sharecroppers, and agrarian laborers organized their communities to combat the rising tide of Jim Crow and economic exploitation. Despite the Black labor movement being an omnipresent aspect of the struggle for human rights for African Americans, it has remained in the shadows somewhat of civil rights and Black power movements. Its erasure is apparent when we refer to the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom Unions to simply the March on Washington. Locally, Rochester's own late great minister, Franklin Delano Roosevelt Lawrence, who passed in 2021, served as a labor and civil rights leader who worked tirelessly to improve wages and working conditions for African Americans, eventually helping to establish a Black-owned corporation. His work with FIGHT, which stands for Freedom, Independence, God, Honor, Today, demonstrated the power of community-led change, with access to jobs to promote that independence being at the center of the movement. Lest this audience subscribe to the convenient notion that these injustices are a thing of the past, safely ensconced in history to be studied, I have some sobering news for you. Barriers to access to the labor market and to the outright theft of Black labor are ongoing injustices that continue to this day. The U.S. Census Bureau estimates that Black women are paid 66% of what non-Hispanic white men are paid for the exact same work. Economic disruptions such as the COVID pandemic or the unconstitutional cessation of congressionally authorized federal funding have an outsized impact on people of color, especially women of color. Efforts to combat these injustices within the political system, such as providing for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs to expand access to jobs, or seeking elected office in traditionally white enclaves, are met with resistance. Informal resistance behind the scenes, and formal resistance in broad daylight. Both forms of pushback are often accompanied by rhetoric that voices support for the very ideals they seek to undermine. The contradiction and irony of a president who is unabashedly and actively working to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, then posting to social media in celebration of Black History Month is lost on no one. But he's hardly the only politician engaged in that type of duplicity. To best understand what's happening, attend to the voices of the directly impacted, especially those with insight into the internal processes, and critically examine the rhetoric from those who benefit from the status quo. who would have you believe they truly support racial equity. Their actions often belie their words. It's undeniable that the history of American labor is also a story of how predominantly white male workers, not necessarily just bosses, kept blacks at the bottom of the wage and job hierarchy, denying them opportunities to feed their families, accumulate household incomes, and aspire to the generational wealth afforded their white peers. Yet, blacks have always refused to accept lower standards of life because of the color of their skin, and instead organized for equality for all. This refusal to lay down at the hands of oppression runs throughout the history of Black people and is key to our future. Black history and Black labor are American history. Happy Black History Month.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Dr. Wagstaff. What a program, what a conversation. I am truly grateful for that. Thank you, Pamela Mensah. What a stirring rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing. And thank you to everybody that showed up today to celebrate Black History Month. It's easy to be discouraged when we look at the world around us, when we see that what's up is now down, and when racism seems to be the law of the land in D.C. Brighton has led the way, and Brighton will continue to lead the way because we are a diverse community and we do celebrate that fact. As I said last night at the conclusion of our town board meeting, the town of Brighton continues to make its offerings and activities available to all members of the community. We have no intention of withdrawing, retreating from the wide range of activities that acknowledge and celebrate the diversity of Brighton in a way that is authentic and meaningful. And yes, we can have some good music anytime you want back there, because we do reject, and these are the words I said last night, we reject the notion that diversity, equity, and inclusion is somehow a way to give preferences to certain people. Quite the opposite. It is, and it will remain, a way to include and make opportunities available to all people. And for that reason, it will continue to be a core part of our operations. Don't let your discouragement lead to fear or retreat. At the same time, let us not allow the hate of others to turn ourselves into purveyors of hate. In those famous words of Dr. King, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Let today be a celebration, and let this month and every month be a time of observance, a time of reflection, and a time for action. Thank you. And Chris, my apologies. Thank you, Chris. You've interpreted us for us before, and it's wonderful to have you here again today. Thank you. I was going to tell her because I was behind. But